Everybody, I want to welcome you to this week's webinar. We're going to learn the basics of HTML, and as that title implies, these are the basics. You've never really explored HTML, and you're kind of scared of it. What is it, and is it going to break me? So we're going to resolve those. We're just going to dive in and explore the basic functionality, what it can do, and why it's important to at least have a high-level comprehension of what's going on behind the scenes in our Canvas courses. So I'm Dr. Sean Newfer, the Director of Educational Technology at TCS Education System, and we'll just dive in. I have a Canvas course for us to explore. And this is a sandbox course, and I'm going to create an announcement, and this is what we're going to play with during this webinar. And feel free if you have questions or if you want to chat at any time, then we have windows for those in GoToWebinar, and I'll respond as we go along. Feel free to interrupt me at any time as well if you want to go over something in more detail, or if you want me to say what I said again, which is perfectly fine. What we're dealing with is code. HTML is hypertext markup language. That's what HTML stands for, and it's a language that computers speak. Whenever you're online on any page on the internet, you have a browser, which could be Chrome, it could be Edge or Safari, and you pull up the web page and the content comes up. Well, the browser has to communicate with the internet essentially and know what it is that it needs to present. So in this case, on this Canvas course, we have various elements. I have a picture, I have icons, I have text. There are effects that happen as I hover over different things with my mouse. I can interact with objects, and everything is spelled accordingly in the right color. I have various icons in the rich content editor. All of these things have a back end, and it can be scary if you just dive in and if you just want to see what a web page looks like. It's going to be intense. You can view a page source for any page. This is what that Canvas page looks like, and it's a bunch of garbage, and we don't need to know all of this. If you're not in web design, or if this isn't part of what you do, then you don't need to know what's going on behind the scenes. But when we're teaching in Canvas, if you're a TA or course developer or a teacher, it's good to know what's happening within this window right here. That window belongs to us. And I'm just going to delete that because I put there as kind of a joke. You know, that's legitimately what code looks like. If you're in the final stages at a low level, we're going to look at only a little bit of what's going on with HTML. We're going to cover some of the popular tags and just get you started. If you're interested in learning more about HTML, then this will be a good starting point for you. And it helps just not to be intimidated by what's going on. So we have, by default, a rich content editor, and this allows me to have text. Let me search for some boilerplate text here. I can have some hard returns, create some paragraphs with this text. And you're familiar with the rich content editor. I can bold certain things, and I can change the color of the text or the background of the text. All of these things impact the HTML that goes on behind the scenes. So let's just take these 4 paragraphs. I have paragraph 1, 2, 3, and 4. And just with that, just with some text and 4 paragraphs, let's look at what the HTML looks like. So I clicked behind the scenes. And again, I'll click that rich content editor, and then I'll click HTML editor in the right corner here to get that rich content editor. So I can see, and Canvas doesn't exactly clean up the HTML very well, but I can do that. Let me get some hard returns so that we can look at exactly what's going on. So hard return a couple of these things. What this is a paragraph tag, and this is one of the most popular tags. It's the brackets with a P, and at the end of the paragraph there's a brackets with a P, but it has this slash, and that slash is important because it tells me the beginning and the end. here's the start of a paragraph, and here is the end of the paragraph. And what does the paragraph consist of? It consists of all of this text right here. And this paragraph consists of this text. I can see the beginning and I can see the end. So let's jump back to the rich content editor, and I can see already that the text is being cleaned up in that aspect. And I can create maybe another paragraph, maybe a smaller paragraph. I'm going to close that out and start it up. It's important, this is a process that you, or a step that you don't want to skip. You don't want to create a new paragraph within a paragraph without closing it out. And that's a mistake that we often make when we're first exploring what is HTML. All right, so I broke that up and created 2 paragraphs, and I can see that reflected on the front end, the rich content editor. Now let's back up. Before we get to paragraphs, it's important that we have headers. And so I'm going to put a heading 2 right here. In the rich content editor, I would highlight that, and I can have a header 2. Now the reason I can't have a header 1 is because on any web page there can only be one header 1 for the entire page. And in this case, the header 1 is going to be the title. My HTML announcement. And for this sandbox, I delayed the posting until next fall, and then I'll delete this this announcement because we have people in the sandbox, and I don't want to announce things to them. All right, so the header 1 would be this HTML announcement, and I have heading 2, but it looks like I didn't actually finish that. So let's highlight that. I'm going to select header 2. Now let's go back to the code. And this is a good way to start with HTML, is take something on the front end, make a change, and then visit the HTML editor and see what changed. So now I have a header 2, which says heading 2, and that would be whatever it is. So it could be, unit 2 overview. And then I'll jump back here, and I can see that has changed. And then I can see my paragraphs down here. Now header 3s are important as well. And it's always important, this concept of nesting. And to teach about nesting, let's go try something in the HTML editor. And I typed this up before, so I won't have to type it out from scratch. But I'm going to create a menu. And this menu for a restaurant is going to demonstrate the concept of headers and nested headers. All right, so on a regular page, this is what it would look like, but unfortunately, H1, I have to change that to H2 because that is the, all right, I guess really H1 would be up here. So menu, H1, and then I have an H2. Underneath H1 needs an H2. I can't start out with an H3. Now you can put H3 through 6 if you wanted. So that this could be an H6, for example. I'm going to put I don't belong here. And then I'm going to close out that H6. This is important because, again, this is telling the browser this is going to be a 6th level heading. This is what I want the heading to say. And this is where the heading is done. If I forget that, Canvas is smart, but on a regular web page, it would think that all of this is part of the H6 and for the rest of the document. Now, a lot of platforms are smart these days, and they realize, oh, you goofed up, you didn't put the H6, and we think that you intended to, so they might help you out a little bit, but it's not proper technique. So if I come back here, I have this H6 that doesn't really belong there. And in the rich content editor, I only have access to, I have paragraph, H2, 3, and 4, and then pre-format, which I won't get into. In reality, you probably don't need more than an H4. If you have more than H4, then you probably have a lot of content on the page, and that might not be so great from a pedagogical standpoint. So here we can see the H2 is appetizers. I have some, oh, I think I might have messed up a little bit. right in here, there should be a main course. So let me add another h2 main course. All right, so this is the concept of nesting. All of these h3s are nested underneath an h2. And this is also important for not just the coding or the web design, but also accessibility purposes, because you have screen readers, and screen readers rely heavily on this concept of headings and orders. Order is very important. Now I could elaborate on this as well. I can put a paragraph under this H3, and I can say, if I can type right, the soup of the day is, and then lorem ipsum, the rest of it. And then for salad, I could say, I wouldn't try the salad. I don't know, the salad chef is feeling weird, or whatever you want to put. The shallot stuff went home early, and now the temp is filling in for the salad. So here I have an H2, an H3, and then I have a paragraph, a lowly paragraph, another H3, and then a lowly paragraph. And so I'm building the structure of my course. And you can see, or rather the page, and you can see the hierarchy. It doesn't look too pretty right here, but this is just to demonstrate the concept of headers. So H2, H3 paragraphs are three of the most popular tags because that deals with content. Now let's check out something called an order list. Now we have bullet lists right here. The difference between an ordered list and an unordered list is one is a bulleted list and the other is a numeric list. So suppose I'm doing a menu, or not a menu, a recipe. So I want to make pasta, and so the ingredients I need are, I don't know how to spell spaghetti. It looks like that's okay. You need, I don't know, a pot of water and some salt to put in the water and some sauce and garnishes, whatever. Okay, so I got, those are my ingredients, and now I have my numbered list. This would be the order in which I do things. Let me put an extra space, and I'll show what that extra space looks like too. I hit a hard enter. If I hit shift and enter, it actually does something different with the HTML, and I'll show that. So first up is I boil the water, and then you cook the pasta, and then you add the rest of the stuff. All right, so I have a list of things, and then I have the order. So let's hop into the HTML editor and see what that looks like. This is a pretty typical list. So UL is the term for unordered list. Unordered meaning it's not numeric, so it's only bullet points. It doesn't matter if spaghetti comes after salt or before sauce. And then I have a list item here. So this is the concept of an HTML list. The HTML says I'm going to start a list right here. It's just a bulleted list, and here's the first item. Here's the line item, and here's the end of the line item. Now, if I were to take out a couple of these line items and put a hard enter, now the browser, it doesn't care about enters. I could put a million spaces between here, but what the browser sees is here's spaghetti, and immediately we see pot of water. And so that's how it reads it: spaghetti, a pot of water. So if I wanted to break that up, I'm going to hit an enter. I'm going to say, well, that's the end of that bullet, and we need a new bullet right here. So in reality, the browser, it doesn't respect things. Like I could put a whole bunch of spaces in between there, and it doesn't recognize that because usually words have only one space, and so it brings it in. There is a code. If I say ampersand non-breaking space semicolon, that's the actual HTML code for a space, which you don't need to know, but I thought it would be fun to show you. If I actually put a whole bunch of HTML spaces in between pot and of, then it does recognize that because it says, oh, the code is telling me I need some spaces right there. That's probably not something that you'll have to do a lot. Sometimes if you want to intentionally have a paragraph, like right here, we have the list and I hit a hard enter to have a paragraph, and then I hit another hard enter to start this list. Then the code, what it does is it says, okay, there's a paragraph, here's where it starts. This paragraph is one space, and there's the end of the paragraph. And that ensures that it's there. Because if I were to take that HTML out, say there's no space, and then come back, and then go back, it's going to say, no, you need to have a space there. And even if you have one letter, the letter A, then that's enough to have the paragraph there. All right, so down here is the ordered list. Ordered list is important because it's numbered. And so the first item is this list item, boil water. I could go ahead and cut that out and paste it down here. When I go back to Rich Content Editor, it changed boil water to step number 3, and that's not good. And so in this case, the order matters because it deals with 1, 2, and 3. Whereas if I were to do the same thing up here, I can cut this down, I can put it below garnishes. It's going to put it below garnishes, but it doesn't really matter because it's just a bulleted list. And so there's not really inherently any importance to the order. Now in recipes, there happens to be an order, because usually they put the ingredients that you use first in the list at the top, and that's a courtesy that I think is smart. But that's the concept of ordered lists. UL, and these are the terms that we're looking at. We're looking at UL, OL, and list items. If you have a list, then you need a list item. I can show you something fun also, and this is a little bit tricky, so I'll just do this real quick. And I'm going to put within this list, I'm going to put an ordered list. And sometimes Canvas changes up what this is like, but if I go back to the Rich Content Editor, I can see here's the list, and before the next list item, I can see another list in there, embedded right in that thing. And likewise, if I had an ordered list and I wanted to put a little bit of unordered in there, and I'm kind of screwing things up, but I'll hit a few hard enters so that we know what we're looking at. Here's an unordered list. Here's a list item. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to close out the list item. All right, and now I need to make sure that the unordered list is closed before that list item. And then I can see, okay, there's 1, 2, 3. Step 3 has a few bullet points. So that's a little bit clever, a little bit tricky. View the recording afterwards if you want to go over it, but I just wanted to throw that out there. We do have a question. It looks like Thad answered it. And he answered it for everybody. So thank you, Thad. I didn't see that you hopped on. All right, so we've covered H3s and H2, paragraphs, ordered lists, such as order of directions for a recipe, unordered lists, which are an ingredient list, a list item. Let's look at, I'm going to put a little bit of that text back up there. And I'm going to break this up into some paragraphs real quick. And again, a great way to explore what does the HTML look like when I do something is I'm going to go ahead and bold something. I am going to underline a few things, and then I'm going to italicize something. So bold, italics, underline. And let's do one more thing. I'm going to change the color of one of the texts to red. Now, red, and I see that there are some Instructure people on the call. My recommendation for red. Now, if you can install UDoIt, which is an accessibility checker. Some of these colors aren't very accessible. Now, they could be accessible given the background, but you want to ensure contrast. And so I have a white background. If I were to choose any of these, most of these first 3 rows, the bottom 3 rows on the dropdown, it's not going to be accessible, and it's going to flag it as such. but just for fun, that red is a pretty standard thing. So let's go visit the HTML editor and see what that looked like. I'm going to delete the rest of this just so that we don't have the clutter right there. All right, so we have a paragraph, and then the first few words are strong. And the words that are strong are lorem, ipsum, dolor, amit, and then I have this tag saying, okay, that's the end of the strong. Strong means bold, which I can see right here. Those are the bold words. All right, so the next one we have is Pinterest, irony, Iceland, copper are all underlined. And so I can see this uses a code that is a span. Span means everything after this element, apply these changes. The changes is, and this is getting into CSS, which we're not really covering today, but text decoration, underline. All right, so everything after this element here is going to be underlined. All right, so we have 4 words, and then it's saying, okay, stop underlining. So that's what that code looks like in the background to underline text. Now for accessibility, again, underlining is actually a frowned upon policy these days. If you want to emphasize something, instead of italicizing or underlining, you want to emphasize with bold. And even some accessibility checkers, they say don't emphasize with colors. Don't apply significance to colors. But if you want to use colors just to dress up, just for fun, that it doesn't have any meaning or purpose, then that's fine. All right, so we also changed the color for these words right here. Let's take a look at what that looks like. It used the span tag again, and then some CSS, which is style equals quotation mark. You can see there's a quotation mark here and a quotation mark here. It's saying, okay, for this we want the color, and it says the color code. Now if I were to tinker around with that, make it 680 or something. Okay, so there are the words, and then I see the end span tag, and so it's saying, okay, this is it. This is the entirety. All of the words after this and before this should be that color. And I changed up the code a little bit, and I made it kind of pink-ish. And so that's how you can see it reflected. Now, if I were to change these words here to a different color, then what we're going to see is there's a span saying, okay, everything after this will be pink, and then we're going to see the end of the span, and then we're going to see a new span saying, okay, everything after this is going to be whatever color that is, fuchsia or purple. All right, so let's look at that span. Here's the color, the pink color. Okay, everything after this, and I guess it didn't close out the span, it just added a new one. It's saying, okay, everything after this one will be color 800080, which is the purple. And then it says, okay, we're done with the span, and we're also done with the other span. Now I could move that span over to here. It wouldn't change anything. All right, and the last thing is italicized. So italicized is EM. Think of that for emphasis. So all of these words are emphasized. And so just within this paragraph, we have the HTML for bold. We have the HTML CSS for underlining. And another practice why it's not always good to underline is because people associate that with hyperlinks. Hyperlinked text is typically underlined, and so you don't want to confuse them and think it's a clickable link when it's not. It's just emphasized. And so bold is the good way to emphasize. We can see how to change a color, and then we can see how to italicize the words right there. Oops, I want to grab this again. I'm going to create a few paragraphs. I'm just going to copy that, so I copy the paragraphs over there. All right, 2 other things I want to show you before we move on. One is a horizontal break. Suppose these are 2 sections, and I wanted to really emphasize the difference between the sections. So I'm going to put a few breaks here. I can see those right here. What I'm going to teach you how to do is a horizontal rule, an HR. And what that does is create a line that distinguishes this text up here to this text down there. And if I did 2, Now I only typed HR, and that's probably a bad habit that I have. The proper code is HR space the slash, and then close it out. Canvas is smart. They know what I mean, so they help me out a little bit. But good rule is as you're learning code, try and find the most recent. Try and get good habits, as you're learning it. Same for break. So again, here are two horizontal rules, and if I want just one, then I can have that there. Now, if you're familiar with creating breaks in Word, so if I were to take this paragraph and hit a hard enter, it creates a second paragraph. It breaks up the paragraph into two, and I can see that. I'm going to delete that. I can see that represented in the code. If I triple click, here's one paragraph, here's a second paragraph. Let me delete that, start over, and instead of creating a paragraph, I'm going to hold Shift and Enter and create a break. So now this is all one paragraph still. When I go to the code, I can see, and I'm gonna put some enters so that we can clearly see what's going on here. I can see the beginning of the paragraph, everything between the beginning and the end is all the paragraph, but then I can see a break right in the middle. And all the break does is it puts everything after it on the next line, but it's still the same paragraph. And that's important for screen readers. And sometimes people put lots of breaks, and that's not always the best. That's not always the best habit, but it is something that you can do, and that's what it looks like. Something that you can do, as in it's possible. Now, if I were to not hold Shift, I'm just going to put a bunch of paragraph breaks. Then you can see the difference is that it creates different paragraphs as opposed to the line breaks. Which, in a lot of cases, for screen readers, for accessibility purposes, it's probably better to use paragraphs than breaks, but their breaks have its purpose as well, maybe separating pictures, for example. All right, so we looked at breaks and we looked at HR, the horizontal rule. I want to show you some tags, some more common tags. One is an image tag. Now, if I have images in my course, then I can go ahead and put the cursor where I want it, click on that, and there's the image. I can do a lot of editing with highlighting the image and going to the rich content editor. I can see where the image came from. The image has to live somewhere on the internet. In this case, it lives in my Canvas course. Excuse me. And it's on the servers, the Canvas servers, which are Amazon Web Services. It lives somewhere, and the computer has to pull that image from somewhere. It can't just create it from nothing. And so this is where that lives. I have alt text right here, and I can see the dimensions. One thing I like about working with a Canvas and with this menu is if I change the dimensions, now 874 is a very large image for Canvas, especially when you're considering mobile users. So maybe I'll try 350. If I put 350 here, it's going to change, that's the width, it's going to change the height automatically. If I click outside of the box, you can see the change right there. If I change the height to 200, it changes the width as well. And that's important because what's incredibly important, because when you adjust an image, you need to make sure that the width and the height are the same proportion. Otherwise, you're going to get really tall, skinny people or really short, fat people that just look kind of weird. And so it's important to have that. And Canvas does that automatically. You don't even have to think about it. That's good. But get into the HTML editor and you can mess some things up. But I have an image here. Let's look at what the code looks like for just an image. So I have a paragraph right there. The image tag is right here, IMG. And that, if I were to delete everything else, if I were to say IMG, that's telling the browser, hey, there's an image here, but that's not a tag. With a paragraph, that's good enough. You can tell the browser, hey, there's going to be a paragraph, here's the content, and this is the end of the paragraph. An image tag is self-enclosed, which means that we need more to it. So we're going to need a source equals quotation mark URL, that is going to be the location where the image lives on the internet. And so for this, I'll just copy, since I have the code right there, I'll copy the code right like that, go out to the rich text editor, and I can see, okay, there's my image, and there's that second image. All right, so that's a start. What else do we need to do? We have alt. Now this is not good alt tab, alt text. Every image needs good alt text. And one thing I like about if I were to go back out to this menu, we can put alt text right here. So alt text is for accessibility purposes, for screen readers especially, but also just general accessibility on the internet. In this case, I could put the alt text. You want 1 to 2 sentences, as descriptive as possible, but as short as possible as well. And so I put 2 people sitting at a table drinking coffee. Or maybe they're drinking tea. I don't know what they're drinking. So I can update that, and let's go back to the HTML and we can see the update. So I have an image, I have the source, and then I have the alt. Alt equals, quotation mark, 2 people sitting at a table drinking tea. And if I were to make a change right here, if I were to change that now to coffee and go back there, click on this, embed image, then I can see. So the HTML window and this pop-up window, it communicates with each other. Now, some cases, the images aren't really all that important. For example, I saw one right here. Okay, this is a banner. This would be at the top of the image. I can say, you know what, don't worry about it. This is just a decorative image. It's not really, oh, I need to click on that first. It's just a decorative image. All right, so then let's see what that looks like in HTML code. We have image. We have source equals, that's where the image is located. I have the width and the height, and then Canvas adds this other thing that says data-decorative equals true. And so that's just telling the screen reader, it's just a fun image. It doesn't have anything to actually do with the course. Now, if you're, I'll put the alt text right here. I'm going to delete the decorative, and I'm going to say alt text desk with computer and a plant. I think there's a plant on the desk there too. I can adjust the width here to 600 pixels, for example, or let's do it really small. Let's do something like 60 pixels, just because that's pretty obvious. Width equals 60. Okay, that's what a 60 pixel wide image looks like. We'll stretch it back out here, make it bigger. Here's where the HTML can actually be pretty handy though. I'm going to delete the height, because if I define the width, then the browser automatically will calculate what the height is. So I'm going to put width equals, instead of pixels, I'm going to put 50%, meaning 50% of the window that it's in. And I will go back to the rich text editor, and you can see, okay, that's what 50% looks like. Let's change that now to 100%. And that's what 100% looks like. And if I were to, this is a hamburger menu, if I were to delete the, or get rid of, hide the course navigation, you can see I have more real estate, and it adjusts the picture automatically. And if I were to make changes, like let's get rid of that, and just play around, you can see the picture actually adjusting because I put a percentage instead of a fixed pixel. Now, if I were to say, if this is 800 pixels, for example, you can just put 800, or px would be 800 pixels. It's going to be fixed there, but what if they're on a mobile device? What if they're on the Canvas app, or the mobile browser on a tablet or a phone, where 800 is really big? Now my monitor here, this is a 27-inch monitor, so it's not very big on this monitor, but it might be big on other screens, and so you have to consider that. So if it's a banner at the top of the page, then it might be a good idea to go in here, and you could even put maybe 75%, and then I'll click on it and go center align. And that's not something I'm going to teach about in this, because that deals with CSS, but this is the code for center align. it's essentially saying we want the margins on the left and the right to be exactly the same, whatever that might be. And so those margins would be different if my picture is at 60% and 75%, but they're equal, which for our purposes means it's centered. That's what centering an image looks like. All right, let's look at, I was going to show you anchor tags, which are hyperlinks. I think I want to instead talk about iframes for a moment. And a good example of an iframe, it would be embedding anything. An iframe, what that looks like is you're going to have an iframe tag, and then you close the iframe tag. An iframe tag means there's some content from outside of Canvas that we're going to put into the course. And so like the image, we have to say, okay, what are we going to put in the course? Well, we're going to put this in the course. It could be a YouTube video, which I have one over on my other screen. I'll go ahead and paste this in there. Okay, so here's a link to a YouTube video, and I'm going to put, we talked about width and height, so I'm going to put the width as maybe 560 pixels wide, and the height, I'll put it at 315 pixels wide. All right, so what that is telling us is that there's going to be a square, an invisible square, that's 560 pixels wide, 315 pixels tall, and the content inside this iframe, this window, is going to be this YouTube video right there. And so that's essentially the only information that we need. And their iframes can be pretty complicated. You can specify all kinds of stuff like autoplay and borders and whatever. But those are the essential components of an iframe. And so let me hop over. I should have pulled this up before. Let me log into Padlet. We'll embed one other thing. Oh, come on. I'm just gonna snag a Padlet, and this is actually a session that I'll be presenting at InstructureCon, how to embed awesome content into your courses. So here's my Padlet. I want to put this into my Canvas page. I'm going to click Share. I'm going to click on this Embed in your blog or website, and you want to grab the embed code. Now this is nuts. It's a lot of code. It's just they specify so many things, what happens. You don't have to worry about that. All you have to do is press copy and hop back over to your page here, and then you press paste. And so many websites just give you the code, and all you have to do is know how to put the code into your page. It could be a Sway, like Microsoft Sway, a Padlet, a ThingLink, Prezi. I don't know if Prezi does that anymore, but Pull Everywhere, a YouTube video, and all you have to do is copy and paste it. And then let's go ahead and save this and see what comes of that. All right, so here's my Padlet. And it's fully functional. It's just like the other Padlet that I have here because it's the exact same thing. I didn't actually put Padlet into the course. I just told the course, by the way, we're going to use this. So if I make any changes to over here, then it'll make changes in Canvas immediately. And again, what the code looks like, it's kind of a mess, but all I did was copy and paste it. Let's go see what that YouTube video looks like. If anybody recognizes that code, it's, oh, what the what? All right, I did something wrong with that code. So, and that could happen. Something might break, and that's why it's good to know an overview of what HTML is. All right, so let me see the video share. I'm on the other side. Okay, I'm on YouTube on the other monitor. I'm going to drop that. I'm going to drop the YouTube code. So we have iframe, width, we have the height, we have the source, and I could even, I can delete all this stuff. That's not really relevant to the code. Somewhere I typed something wrong, which is the frustration of HTML, is sometimes you might miss one quotation mark or one thing, and it breaks everything. and that's not good. All right, so here we are. Got my video. All right, so I got two completely interactive elements. And if this was 2009, then that would have been an awesome meme joke that I play on you. But I always rickroll my students once every term. Most of the time it's hidden and they don't find it, but every once in a while. All right, so that's what that code looks like. Recapping for now, we've looked at headers and paragraphs and lists and formatting with bold and underline, and we've created breaks and horizontal lines. We've played with images and iframes. If you're looking at HTML, there are certain things that are a no-no for Canvas. And one of those, we talked about it, it's the H1 header. And for those who didn't catch the very beginning, the reason why you never have an H1 header in your code is because there can only be one H1 on any given website, and the H1 is always going to be the title right here. Whatever I call this, my HTML announcement, that becomes the H1. So underneath, I can only start with H2. And that's why in the rich content editor, you don't see an option for H1. H2 is the big one right there. Another thing that's no, you might see terms like HTML or body. Now, typically a web page, if you're designing it from scratch, it would look like this. There's an HTML, there's a body, this is the content, these are your paragraphs, your headers, your images, everything on the web page, and then you say, okay, web page is done. And the reason why we don't have that is because we're not writing a web page. All we're dealing with is this little window in Canvas. And again, if I were to look at the code, you can see there's already an HTML tag at the very top of that page. There's a header. If I scroll down past the scripts, I'll be able to see the body. Here's the body tag. So this is everything that we actually see. Scroll down to the very bottom and I can see the end of the body, the end of the HTML. And that's everything on this page. That includes this interactive menu, these hyperlinks, the links on the right, the global interface. All of this is the web page. We don't actually write web pages. We just have a little bit of content that we work with. So we don't have H1s, HTML tags, or body tags. And the other thing that we don't really work on is CSS, with some exceptions. There are some internal inline CSS that we can do, but no internal, no external CSS, which those might be terms that don't mean much. Ultimately, if you Google Canvas whitelist, then you should be able to identify all of the elements as you start exploring HTML and tinkering with CSS and you learn some of the capabilities. You just don't want to be disappointed that there are certain things that that Canvas doesn't support. So these are all the tags that they do support, and it's plenty to get started with. We have anchor tags. I'm not going to show you divs, but those are a lot of fun too. We have the video tag, H2 through H6. You notice H1 is not on the list because it's not an allowed tag. We have our HR, a lot of tags, and then it explains what these do. And if you wanted to also explore more, there are things we didn't talk about, like divs or tables, for example. You can go to a place called W3 Schools, and even if you Google HTML, if you can spell it, HTML table, type into Google, the first thing that's going to pop up will be a link to W3 Schools. So I'll click on that. It's going to teach you about not just HTML tables, but pretty much everything that you would want to know to get started with. And then you have a try it yourself editor where they say, here's an example of a table. Why don't you tinker with things? And I can say, I'm just going to change a couple things. There's Joe and Bob. I run it and I can see my changes right there, Joe and Bob. So you can tinker on with that when you're ready. Then you can copy that into Canvas in the HTML editor and start tinkering away. And so, yeah, these are plenty of resources. And I wanted to actually, I'll take a moment and address some of the questions now before I wrap up. I need to wrap up in a minute. So, see, if you have an existing paragraph and wanted to insert a video link within the paragraph in the code, what is the best approach? A lot of times, you'll probably want to actually put the video in between paragraphs. And so if I have a paragraph here, and where's my lorem ipsum? All right, so I have that, and then I have my video, my rickroll. You could do that. I would at least put a break before and after the video at the bare minimum. But probably what you'll want to do is just before the video, close out the paragraph. Oops. And then right after the video, just start a new paragraph. I think that's probably the best practice, and that's how you would do that. So another question: why wouldn't you just pull the embed code from YouTube instead of writing the entire HTML code? You would. And that's a great point, and that's what I ended up having to do because somehow I did the code wrong, and that's why if you're embedding something, usually they'll give you embed code. Sorry for the multiple rickrolls. You'll click share under the video, embed, and all you do is copy this code and pull it over. But I was just trying to show the basic elements of an iframe, which is the source, the width, and the height, and that's why I did that. And then you commented, yeah, you asked the question too soon. Sorry about that. Is there an issue with students viewing these embeds? Do they need to allow them in browsers? Most of the time, no. For example, if I'm on Sway, and I just want to grab, let me click on a Sway. So this is another example of something that you could embed into your code. I'm going to click share. This is in the top right corner. I'm going to grab the embed code and embed that. Now, if they're giving you embed code, that's essentially them telling you legally, logistically, this is on the internet. Here's how you can put this on your blog, your website, your Canvas course. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that, and I'll put that right there. Now, sometimes I say that, but there might be times when you have a Padlet, for example, that's password protected, and I do that sometimes with my class. And in that case, pretend like this is password protected right here. I'll just tell the students the password is, Canvas HTML or whatever the password, and so then it's embedded in there. They would just put the password on the page that prompts them. But embedding content, you don't necessarily have to own the content. That's the whole purpose of embedding content and for the platforms that allow you to embed their content, is they're saying, yeah, you can share it. Here's how you would share it. Here's the code, how you would do that. A follow-up question. So if your Padlet site is login required, would the other users in the same way you do since you're the owner, the one logged in? Yeah, this is kind of a little bit of a side. If you're in Padlet, you can allow people to edit, or you can allow people to read, or they can be moderators. You can enroll them by their email addresses, for example. There are various approaches to that. So, and that's not really right now. I'm kind of focusing on the HTML, but shameless plug for InstructureCon. Come to my InstructureCon session, and I'm going to talk about the ins and outs about logistics for embedding content. I would like to thank you all for attending this webinar. I had a blast presenting this, and I hope that you learned something, that you can start exploring the world of HTML. And if you have questions, feel free to email me. And thank you again for coming.